on each meeting. Sometimes we have 3 meetings. Today we're scheduled to have 2 meetings, the Board of Health and the Water Quality District Board. So we'll take comments after any scheduled public hearings, which we have one today. We'll also take public comments on items on the agenda that have possible action once the motion is made and is on the table. For the record, if you're here to make public comments, if you can state and spell your name for the record for our meeting minutes. And public comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person commenting on a motion on the floor or on items down on the agenda. And then just be mindful that the time is meant for comments and it's not a Q&A session for staff or the board. So we'll take everything as a comment. So there's a little bit of instructions here as well. If you're in the Teams meeting on your computer, up at the top of your call box, there's an icon, a reactions icon where you can raise and lower your hand. So once called upon, it'll alert me that you're wanting to make comment. So you can unmute and make comment. If you're on the app on your phone, again, there's the 3-dot button, the more options 3-dot button at the bottom. You can select to raise your hand from that menu, and then we'll call on you again. And then if you're a dial-in participant, we'll go through the last 2 digits of your phone number. Once your phone number is announced, you can unmute and make your comment. So just to let everyone know how that will work today. So just wanted to get that that business out of the way. And then I just stopped sharing and I'm just looking to see, and I don't see yet that that we actually have a quorum because I don't see that Josh or Dr. Singer have joined yet.
Debbie, would you like me to text both of them?
Yes, please, if you can, and figure out where they are, because I can't take up any of the action items, which the Board of Health agenda is heavy on those today with a public hearing and budgets.
Debbie, this is Julie. I can tell you that Dr. Stenger emailed earlier this morning and wanted to reconfirm whether the meeting was hybrid or Teams only, and I did share with him that it's Teams only, and he should have the link through many different communications.
Yep.
He didn't mention any kind of patient scheduling issue, and I'm trying to reach out quickly to Kyla Lenners and in the commissioner's office to make sure that Josh is not having problems connecting.
Okay. And Nick, I see you're on, and the 40 number has gone away, which is great. I guess we can just this is not in the way it was announced, but just in the interest of keeping things moving for the Board of Health in and out of order, because we have a hearing scheduled first, but we can take agenda item number 2, which is public comments on items not on the agenda. And I think we do have some members of the public here. So if you're here today to comment on items not on the agenda, we'd be happy to take those now. I am not hearing any. There's a second opportunity under the Water Quality District Board to also comment to that board on items not in the agenda. So I think I'm just watching to see when they log on, but just in the interest of keeping things moving, Deshane, would you be prepared to give the COVID-19 briefing in advance of the hearing?
Yeah, I can. If you'd like, I can go ahead and do that now.
Awesome, thank you.
Yes, and then sorry, I was going through my emails trying to find Dr. Stenger's number. So I didn't get a chance to find it. I didn't text him. I did text Josh. So I'm going to. The key indicators that I'm going to go over are actually posted publicly on our website, the Missoula Info website. So that should hopefully be sharing now. And as soon as it does that, I can't see y'all anymore. So if anybody has questions, Debbie, if you can just let me know. So where are we at right now? We are still largely within the goal area where we want to be. That being said, we are seeing a very small uptick in COVID cases here in the county, but we have not shown that we're moving beyond our target. So we are in community spread, but we are still well within the goal for where we want to keep cases at. So we did find out today that our doubling time has reduced to 40 days. So what that means is that every 40 days, the number of cases doubles. But that is still, well above the 22 days target. So we want to stay above 22 days, and we're at 40 days. And so we are seeing, a few more positive cases right now. That being said, we are also doing really great with our vaccine efforts. So many folks might know that we lead the state right now in our vaccinations. So the most important number I'm going to jump down to here. So as of yesterday, we had 63% of the eligible population had received at least one dose of the vaccine, and 58% of the eligible population is fully vaccinated. And again, that's the highest number, or it was at the time, the highest number of any county in the state. And then for our progress toward herd immunity, that's 51% of the entire county population is fully vaccinated. We want to get that up to 75%. So we still have some room, especially what we're seeing is we have a lot of room for vaccination growth in that under 30 population. And so we are, working to really not just get the word out, but make it as easy as possible. I think that, I hope that folks have seen that we have mobile clinics, we're doing homebound clinics. The Lucky's site, the former Lucky's site, the mall site is open, and we try to make it as easy as possible and convenient as possible for people to get the vaccine, and that's working. We're leading the state in our vaccination rate. And then we are also, even though we are seeing a small uptick right now in our incidents, we are still lower in incidents than any of the other urban counties in Montana. So it's good news, and what we expect it's never just a straight down. As we go down, there's going to be little ups and then more downs and then little ups. So we're hitting, a little up, but still on our way down. And that is the update on COVID.
Amber, question for DeShane?
Yeah, hi DeShane, and welcome. It's exciting to have you here and have you running this part of it. I'm curious about, and maybe I missed this as you were going through, how many people we have hospitalized currently, and also how you feel that I know we have the mobile units, we've got Lucky's, but how's the uptake? I mean, some of the outreach we're doing, how's that working? How are we doing in the I think it was the 20 to 30-year-old age range that originally we were kind of struggling with. So would you speak to some of those?
Yeah, so we as of yesterday have 2 Missoula County residents currently hospitalized and 5 non-Missoula County residents currently hospitalized. So 7 total, much lower than, what it was last fall, at the height. So we have 7 individuals currently hospitalized. Our 7-day rolling average of new cases has actually, now that I'm looking, has gone back down a little bit. And so that's what we see. And what folks might notice is on that key indicator sheet, we took off the column that said better or worse, only because now that the numbers are so small, it only takes a little number to make it look like it's getting better or worse. And so instead, what we want to do is just look at the numbers overall where we're at, and where we are at is well within the goals for where we want to be. And then as far as outreach, I mean, I think that all of our outreach efforts have resulted in community members being vaccinated. Not necessarily, in droves, but this is, this last 25% that we're trying to go for is maybe going to have to be pretty piecemeal. We're going to have to hit 25 people over here, 50 people over here, 50 people over here. I think what we have seen is the really large en masse, 1,000 people at one time. That's probably done for now. So what we're hitting is those remaining pockets. And it's also, a lot of people are waiting because they want to see other people have the vaccine for weeks or months before they feel like it's safe for them to get it. So those folks are actually starting to come out. I was at the clinic downtown at Warden's, and that was, a young woman who was there. She's like, well, my roommate got it 2 months ago when it first came out, and now I'm going to get it because, she's doing okay. So, some of that hesitancy is starting to wean away. But it's going to be slow. I have a feeling, and, Ellen is on and can, jump in and give a much more intelligently informed perspective. But I have a feeling that, where we go from here is it's going to take some effort to get the remaining folks vaccinated. But I see Ellen has raised her hand and probably ready to jump in.
Deshane, if you still have the website open and can share again, I'm pretty sure on the VAX, our data dashboard is just a little bit newer to us. On the VAX data, on one of those pages, you actually can see the age ranges by decade of life, which was part of Amber's question. You might have to switch a page. I think you're on the, yeah, so, and sorry to make you walk through this in a public meeting, but it might be a good learning opportunity for people who want to look this up themselves. If you go back to our data dashboard, and then the board can do this once we find it. So you go back into Missoula. Yeah, that one. And instead of hitting the data, yeah, see the second one, vaccine data? There we go. There we go. There's the age ranges, Amber, and members of the public who wish to follow along by themselves. You can see those in the upper left. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Thanks. Deb, could I have one more follow-up question?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm curious just from reading, are we tracking with hospitalizations whether those people are vaccinated or not?
That is absolutely being tracked. I don't know it off the top of my head. Ellen, do you or?
We are tracking for the state, and then the state's putting together the picture. And I don't have numbers on that. I can tell you though that the vaccine breakthrough rate is like significantly less than 1%, and we do have that locally. So when somebody's in the hospital, unless they're having recurring problems from having gotten COVID some time ago, which some folks do have, if it's a new case, the chances are very, very high that it's an unvaccinated or not fully vaccinated person. And the national data is showing that as well.
Thanks. Josh, you have a question? Or are you just announcing that you're here?
Yes, I got here a few minutes ago. I'm sorry to be late, but I'm definitely here.
And did you have a question on the
No,
COVID-19? No. Okay, thank you. Pam, question?
I don't have a question, but I just wanted to chime in. My daughter is one of the COVID nurses at St. Pat's, and what she has been seeing, what they've been seeing at St. Pat's, is that the majority of people now who are getting sick are unvaccinated. However, there are some breakthrough vaccinated people, some who've only had one shot, some who've had two. The ones who have had two are primarily immune compromised in some way. So they may have had a renal transplant, be on medications to suppress their immune system, that type of thing. So that's the picture that they're seeing at St. Pat's.
Thank you. Good information. I think with that, we'll head back up to agenda item number 1 and look at a hearing and possible action on Logjam Presents and Kettle House Brewery request for variance from Health Code Regulation 1, wastewater treatment and disposal systems. And Shannon is going to give the staff presentation.
Very much. I am trying to start the slideshow. Okay, there we go. And now I will share it. Oh, it doesn't matter. Okay, sorry. Let's see. That's not what I wanted to do. And I don't know that I can change it.
Yeah, we're getting the presenter view.
Yeah. Okay, hold on. I'm sorry, everybody. Having to end the show, and then I have to move it, and then I have to start again. Okay. Here we go. Why are you doing this to me? I don't know how to stop the display. This other one. Well, I'm afraid I might just have to go with what's happening here.
Shannon, this is Julie. If you'd like to go ahead and start, but send the PowerPoint file to Kathy and I can see if I can get it loaded for you and display it.
It's displaying, but it's just for some reason not letting me change that presentation so that
Yeah, that seems to be something new with a late update to PowerPoint. I encountered that yesterday, so I can see if I can try to get it so that it'll just show the PowerPoint and display it for you and advance through it as you indicate for me to do so, if you'd like.
Okay, how about we just go with this for right now, even though it's a weird view, and then I can do that for the many other documents that I have, so we don't hold it up.
Thank you.
So I apologize for this view, but I can't seem to get back over there to change it. Okay, so we are here to talk about the variance request for the Kettle House Amphitheater. The applicants are both Logjam Presents and the Kettle House Brewery. Okay, so the variance request is to allow the use of chemical toilets as the approved toilet facilities at the amphitheater indefinitely. So there have been some previous variance requests, which I will cover later. And this would not require additional variance requests as time goes on. The reason a variance request is necessary is because Regulation 1, which are the wastewater regulations in the Missoula City County Health Code, have two requirements. One, that permanent structures be served by approved toilet facilities, and that chemical toilets cannot be approved toilet facilities for permanent structures. And then it specifically lists amphitheater as in the definition of permanent structure. Excuse me, as structure. So there is a purpose behind this regulation. And what we don't want is for people to build structures that will be routinely occupied by people without first considering where they will have a wastewater system. And secondly, the chemical toilets really are, and if they are not handled correctly, and if they are not always on site, and if they're not kept clean, can create problems. So chemical toilets do require regular maintenance, and sometimes that becomes expensive, and so people don't want to do it anymore. And they are easily transported off-site. And so there have been times in the past where we have had facilities that were built with the idea that chemical toilets would be used, that there either weren't enough of the chemical toilets to serve the facility, they weren't maintained, they would be tipped over, and they just weren't always on site when the facility was open. For the timeline for this variance, there was a variance in 2017 that the health board approved to allow chemical toilets to be used on the site for 1 year, and that expired in December. And then in April, the health board granted a 2-year variance to give more time to really figure out, first of all, a pretty complicated system, and second of all, really to decide what the toilet facilities, permanent toilet facilities, should look like on the site. That expired in 2019, and then the facility didn't operate in 2020. So in 2021, we reached out to the owner of the site, and then 2 days later, he submitted a variance application, the variance application that you guys have in front of you. We determined that the application was complete after some back and forth on May 28th, and then set the hearing for today. And the neighboring property owners were notified as required in the regulation, and there was legal notice published in the paper as required in the regulation. And then, of course, information was also available on our website for people who were interested. So for those of you who are not familiar, I think most people are familiar with where this is. And so you could see here, this is Missoula. Oh, I don't know if you could see my cursor because of the weird thing. I don't think you can, but you could see on the top there that Missoula is off to the left, and there's a circle as you go up towards Highway 200, just past the old mill site, up towards Sealy Lake or Ovando, Great Falls, that's the site what we're talking about. And then the picture below is a picture, I think, from Logjam Presents website that is showing you the amphitheater. It's an absolute gorgeous place to see concerts. So there are some very, very specific things that the board has to find before you can grant a variance. And those are laid out in the rules. And so this is a lot of words on the slide, but I'll go through it one by one. So the variance, excuse me, the first requirement is the variance must be necessary to address extraordinary conditions that the applicant could not have reasonably prevented. And so staff sees that this has been met simply because of the use patterns of the restrooms at the amphitheater are such that it doesn't lend itself well to a septic system, because there's really heavy use and then no use at all, and really heavy use and no use at all. So there would need to be, it's not technologically impossible to figure out a septic system for that, but it would take some pretty good engineering to figure out how to deal with the surge that happens, and then make sure that your system kind of stays alive while it's not being used. In addition, the applicants have noted that COVID-19 really did have an impact on this facility, and that they were closed for 18 months, limiting their ability to fund even investigation of an on-site system. And then I should say, in addition to that, there are some land area concerns that the applicants have also brought up about how much land area would be needed to deal with the surges that are needed for a 4,000 seat amphitheater. Second requirement is the board has to find that compliance with the health code from which the variance is requested would result in undue hardship to the applicant. I think that it is very clear that if the variance is denied, the venue would not be able to legally operate in 2021. And the applicants have stated that they do not have the financial resources to build permanent bathrooms right now because of COVID-19 and what has happened there. The other thing that I'll just tell you is that before permanent bathrooms could be built, of course, there's a lot of steps in the process, but one of those steps is that the septic system has to be designed and engineered, reviewed as a public system, and then there has to be a new approval that's issued by DEQ before that could happen. Also, there have to be no other ways that they could feasibly comply with the requirements. And so really, in this case, the only option is either for them to have permanent bathrooms or for them to have, to be able to use chemical toilets on site. There's not another reasonable alternative that they could comply with. It has to not be more than the minimum needed to address the extraordinary condition. Like, they can't just ask for other variances even if they don't need them. And we find that the staff has found that the applicants are not asking to deviate from any other provisions of the health code, and certainly aren't asking for more than needed to address the wastewater system on site. And then because it's a septic, it's a variance from Regulation 1 from the septic regulations, there are some other considerations that the board have to look at. And so first of all, you have to find that granting the variance will not contaminate any actual or potential drinking water supply. The chemical toilets, of course, contain all the wastewater that's generated, and then they're pumped out by a licensed pumper and then disposed of in a way that's approved by DEQ. So there's no wastewater that is being disposed of on site, and so wells in the area would not be contaminated. In addition, just kind of for extra precautions, we recommend a condition that they will be at least 50 feet from wells or surface water, and frankly, they're a lot further away than that. So, secondly, the board has to find that the variance requirements, that it would not cause a public health hazard as a result of access to insects, rodents, or other possible carriers of disease. So these chemical toilets have self-closing doors and air vents that are screened. They're stored in a fenced area that's locked in between events. Not that that would keep insects or rodents out, but and then the employees check regularly to ensure that the doors are closed. And then it also can't be accessible to people or animals. And so that's, I guess, this is where this comes in. The toilets are stored in a fenced area that's locked when there are not events going on, and that employees keep an eye on the porta potties. Excuse me. The health board also has to find that the variance would not violate a law or regulation governing pollution or wastewater treatment and disposal. So you couldn't, for instance, allow a variance that would then pollute water or that would allow surfacing wastewater. And that is not the case here. There's not another rule governing water pollution or wastewater treatment than the one that they're asking for a variance for. It also cannot pollute or contaminate state waters or degrade state waters. And again, as I said earlier, all the contents of the chemical toilets are contained in the chemical toilets until they are hauled off in an approved manner by a licensed septic hauler, and nothing is being disposed of on site. And then finally, it cannot cause a nuisance due to odor, unsightly appearance, or other consideration. The toilets are pumped after each event, and they contain a strong deodorizer to prevent there from being smells. They're in a location that is kind of tucked in and blends in. And then also the idea that chemical toilets, people are used to seeing chemical toilets at outdoor events. It's a common thing that you would see. So in addition to all the things that you have to find, there's also a restriction. These are kind of very similar, but the board cannot approve a variance if the proposal adversely affects health, safety, or welfare of any individual or causes environmental effects greater than those that would be caused if they were complying with the health code. And we find that there are not adverse effects resulting from the variance. There's no septic wastewater that's being applied on site. And there are steps that are being taken to ensure that the porta potty or the chemical toilets are kept clean. The other thing that we need to say is the applicants have operated for 3 seasons without the health department receiving a complaint about the porta potties or the condition of the porta potties or any of that, or chemical toilets, official word. So the staff does recommend approval with the following conditions. Chemical toilets have to be available whenever the venue is occupied, including when people are present between scheduled events. The applicants have to maintain the chemical toilets in a sanitary fashion. The chemical toilets have to be rented by an approved DEQ supplier, be of sturdy condition to ensure no leakage of wastewater occurs. The doors have to be self-closing, and the other outer openings have to be screened to exclude insects. The chemical toilets have to be at least 50 feet away from wells and surface water, and secured by some method so that they will not be tipped over by wind or people or other forces. The contents have to be disposed of off-site in a manner that's approved by DEQ. If the applicants wish to install bathrooms in the future, they will need to do a rewrite of the DEQ sanitation approval. It's sometimes called a COSA, which is a certificate of subdivision approval. Before they can do that, it would have to be reviewed as a public system. Failure, then these are very traditional. Failure to comply with conditions of the variance and any permit issued under the variance would void it in its entirety. One of the things that the applicants are asking for is for it to be an indefinite ability for them to use chemical toilets, and that indefiniteness would end if they sold it or it became under somebody else's was the operator or the ownership of that. So variances are only good for the applicants, and they're non-transferable. That's part of the health code. And then, of course, the variance doesn't relieve applicants of any other obligations that they may have under local, state, and federal laws or regulations. So we did get some written public comments, and those were forwarded to the board. And I don't know that all of you have been able to see them this morning because you just got them this morning. We got 4 comments. We actually got 5, but I'm going to talk about 4 of them. And then we got one really forwarded to Gina and I very late, and so Gina can, and it's more complicated, so Gina's going to go over that one, unless the person who shared the comments is actually on and wants to do that for himself. I don't know. I don't see that, but I'll first go over these 4. So one of the 4 said, please just don't approve it, and then the other 3 did have some issues that they looked at or that they felt were a problem there. And I think most of them were like, yes, go ahead and give them some more time, but don't allow it indefinitely. Don't make it a permanent thing. And their concerns are that the chemical toilets were disgusting and gross. Like I said, we haven't gotten a complaint about the toilets or the chemical toilets at the facility. that they are, and remember, one of the conditions is that they be kept in a sanitary condition. So there is a connection there. And if we were made aware of a problem, we certainly would contact the applicant and operator of the site and tell them that we had gotten those complaints. The other ones are that they're poorly lit, and that's leading to some people's safety concerns, or that it's just very dark, and maybe that's something that the applicant can address. That the hand washing stations run out of water and the sanitizing stations run out of sanitizer. I would hope that Nick would also be able to address that, and that it's not ADA compliant, or that it makes ADA compliance difficult. I do believe that there are ADA compliant porta potties that are on site, but again, would ask that Nick talk about that when he has his opportunity. So right now, if I could just ask, Debbie, do you see, or
I don't, the comment number 5 that we received was from John Kevin Hunt, and I don't see that he's on the call. So if Gina can address that,
okay,
that'd be great.
okay.
Hi, yeah, thanks, Debbie. Like Shannon said, this one came in to the department just a minute after 5 yesterday, and it also came to us with not a whole lot of time today, and it's lengthy, and so Shannon, in her extreme busyness, just didn't quite have a chance. So I've looked through it and I've summarized it. I've also included some points that Shannon and I have discussed about why, after talking about this comment and the concerns raised by the commenter, why we're not choosing to add additional conditions or change the staff's recommendation to the board. In general, this commenter asks the board to oppose the variance, to return it to staff, to direct staff to reevaluate the health impacts of chemical toilets, and to ask for more information from the applicant. Asks for the board to defer a decision or to just deny the variance. I think this comment is about 8 pages, and so the first, it looks like 5 pages or so, generally kind of talks about the risks of the chemicals used in the toilet, like formaldehyde, includes some study citations about cancer-causing agents. It also discusses the risks of the byproducts like methane and their effects on human health and climate change, and then raises the concern about things like flood or earthquake or some sort of human activity that would cause the chemical toilets to spill their contents, and the associated risk, of course, to human health and the river. The commenter believes that would be an unacceptable risk. And, staff, of course, recognizes that there are risks associated with chemical toilets. That's why we're hearing a variance today. They're limited by rule. We also recognize that connection to a public sewer system or a properly designed septic system eliminates some of those concerns raised by the commenters, both this 5th comment and the ones that Shannon has described, but not necessarily all of them. Bathrooms at event venues of any type can present unsanitary conditions, and it oftentimes comes down to how the facility is managed or maintained. The rest of the comment document surrounds the criterion of hardship, undue hardship. The first part discusses an assertion by the applicant of an undue financial hardship at this time, citing logjams, simultaneous business ventures, and some media articles that indicate that the businesses are doing very well. The commenter disagrees that this is an undue hardship as well, by assuming that the applicant likely knew that permanent bathrooms would be required, but constructed the amphitheater anyway without complying. And with respect to the request that the board direct staff to obtain additional financial information from the applicant, it's not typical or consistent with what we've done with previous applications. Of course, that is something that the board could direct us to do, I suppose. But requesting those kinds of records from property owners or business owners is just has not been in our wheelhouse, nor do we probably have the expertise to draw some solid or consistent conclusions from those types of records. It's just not our area of expertise. And additionally, Shannon kind of touched upon this as well. When we were evaluating hardship, I think that hardship goes beyond the simplicity of how much a permanent system would cost versus the cost of chemical toilets. So the feasibility of installing a septic system to manage this amount of sporadic or dynamic wastewater flow has really not been fully explored or finally determined. The land out there at the old mill site, what they have potentially available for a subsurface disposal system has pretty unique characteristics and some size constraints. And so I think it's more than just a numbers comparison at this point. There's other extraordinary conditions that we were evaluating when looking at those criteria. And then the rest of the comment looks like, again, recommends the board to defer a decision or deny it, and then includes some recommended conditions should the board continue to consider the variance. All right, that's all I have.
And then, so I guess I'll end with the proposed motion, which would be to adopt the proposed findings of fact, conclusion of law and decision, approving the variance request with conditions that allows the use of chemical toilets at the Kettle House Amphitheater in Bonner. And I would just say that with one difference in that I think that it is important, and Anna will say that it's important to amend the decision in a way that acknowledges that we got public comments and how the board addresses them. The reason why with these public comments that the staff and the staff recommends or the board still finds that the variance could be granted if that's where you're going to go with it. But that's our recommendation.
Thanks, Shannon. Nick, do you have a presentation as the applicant before we take up a motion?
I don't. I was just going to speak to it verbally, if that's okay. A few things. One, I appreciate the board's time to consider this and the amount of time staff has put into this. I appreciate that they're still coming out of COVID and are pretty busy, and this is the last thing they wanted to deal with. So, and I apologize for the lateness of this application until April, May. I didn't even know I was going to be able to have a season out at the Kettle House Amphitheater. So if I'm being honest, the last thing in the world I was thinking about were chemical toilets over the past 18 months. So those are the two. I just want to put that out there first. To get to the specific comments, I'd like to address first Shannon's and then get on to Gina's. The unsanitary or poor conditions of the toilet, in 3 years, we have never had a single complaint from a single customer on our toilet situation. Sweet Pea, who does our servicing and provides the toilets, has always committed to giving us brand new toilets, which we've always had at the facility. They clean them thoroughly after each show. We have staff check them during the show to make sure that they maintain toilet paper. They are well lit. That is an inaccurate statement. We have over 10 lights dedicated to this fenced-in enclosed area that light the toilet. And I have never had a complaint that they're not well lit. We oversupply toilets by quite a bit. We provide 70 toilets, which is the same amount of toilets we provided for the Ogren show, the Mumford & Sons Ogren show, so which had almost 3 times as many people. So I take issue with all of those comments. I don't think they're accurate, and I don't think they represent the reality of how we've run them, and we've never had complaints that reflect any of those comments. With respect to the financial hardship, I think it's kind of naive to say that we haven't suffered a major financial hardship with the COVID and the implications it's had on our business. In 2020, I operated at less than 1% of my 2019 revenue. Not many businesses survive operating at less than 1% of their 2019 revenue. So we had a clear financial hardship. Yes, we have announced the launching of Elm, but that was a project that was started 2 years ago and had to be placed on a halt during COVID because we didn't have the financial resources to continuing during construction. So that project sat unconstructed, unworked on for over a year, and we restarted that. We only had about 2 months to go, and we have no choice but to launch that. That has bank financing, has requirements from our lenders, and we were in a position where we had to relaunch that venue. So to suggest that demonstrates we're in a strong financial position is really absurd and naive. We have lost over $4 million as a result of COVID, and continue to struggle to come out of COVID. With respect to the specifics of the bathrooms, I'd like to reemphasize that for us to be able to adequately provide a wastewater system, we would lose probably 200 to 250 parking stalls and a lot of land on the Kettle House site that I don't have under lease. So Tim and Kettle House Brewery would have to give up that land, which is an undue hardship on them and something that's hard for them to even consider, frankly. So it is a complicated system because that site is not hooked up to sewer. So those are, I hope I've addressed the concerns, and if board members feel like I missed something, please raise it, but those are the main items that I saw during the presentation.
Nick, can you address the mobility concerns or ADA accessibility toilets that are available and accessible?
Yeah, we have 4 fully compliant ADA toilets. We have graded the land to make sure that they're accessible. They're at the beginning of the entrance in the gated area. Again, we've never had a complaint on our accessibility of our toilets, and they are absolutely available.
Thank you. So I think at this time we could entertain a motion if a board member is so moved. And Shannon, it might help to pop that back up.
This is Josh. I was just going to ask if Shannon could bring it back up.
And Anna, if you can jump in, if there's any rewording of this motion that Shannon indicated, that would be beneficial for the action. Anna, can you speak to that?
Yeah, hi. I don't think that the motion needs to be reworded, but I do think that the board findings need to address the substance and response to the public comments received.
Thank you. Helpful. Amber, did you have a question, or are you ready to move?
Yeah, thanks. I was gonna make the motion. I'd like to speak to it afterwards, if that's okay.
Yes.
So wait, they're typing. Let me see. I'm gonna make the proposal. Hold on. Let me let her. I'll speak to it first, and then I'll read it after it's actually done. I am going to support this motion. I think that listening to the presentation and seeing what staff has done, that the work that they've done, the research they've done around it, that the variance requirements have been met and the restrictions are not an issue. I also, Nick, I appreciate your comments around everyone else's comments. I also believe that this is an important step that we can make towards some level of economic recovery from COVID. I believe everyone has suffered from COVID, specifically the entertainment industry. So I don't see any. I see some very positives with approving it, and given what we've just learned about it, I don't see a problem that would prevent me from voting for it. So those are my comments before I read the motion, I guess. So I propose that we adopt the proposed findings of facts, conclusions of law, and decision with an additional explanation of the board's response to the public comments received, approving the variance request with conditions that allow the use of the chemical toilets at the Kettle House Amphitheater in Bonner, Montana. Thanks.
Thank you. That was a mouthful. Board comments or questions for staff? I guess I'll start out, and Shannon, this is probably a question that you can answer just for the board, everyone present, and for the public. And it's with respect to the possibility for public sewer in the Bonner area, and some of the things that might have been in motion in 2017 and 18, and what's the possible timeline for an actual, public sewer main to be run on the highway that could allow for a connection.
Nick probably knows actually a lot more about it than me, but I would say that there is nothing currently in the works, and that the community, there are parts of the community that know that they would have a better chance of developing that community if they had some sort of sewer available, whether it's an extension of the Missoula public sewer, or if they could create something on in the area. But right now there's just nothing. There's nothing being planned as far as I know. Nick, do you have any other insight?
I don't. I've heard little bits here and there that the mill is thinking of trying to do something so they can further develop that property, but that is a long way off and really unknown at this time.
Thank you. So anything that could be done in terms of public sewer for a large system would be an on-site wastewater treatment and disposal facility. So it just sort of sets the boundaries for what the possibilities are. Thank you. Pam, you're up next with a question or comment.
So I definitely think that there has been a COVID impact on the entertainment business, and can definitely see why Nick would ask for a variance at this point. I do believe, however, I guess the big thing is I have trouble with the word indefinitely. And as I remember, and maybe I'm remembering wrong, but we had quite a discussion last time he asked for a variance about how long we would allow that to go, and that we would expect him. It was my understanding that we expected that there would be at some point a septic system that would deal with the waste, and that we wouldn't do this indefinitely. So I guess my concern is the indefinite part of it, and I definitely see that a variance would be needed at this point, but I'm hesitant about indefinitely. So my comment.
Thank you. Dr. Sanger, you have a comment or question?
I have two questions, and one is a question along the line of what Pam was just saying. But my one question for Shannon and staff is there any other venue in the county that is using chemical toilets on this scale, on an ongoing basis? Just more for information. And my second question is about just sort of making this variance permanent as opposed to revisiting it at some point in the future. And I guess my questions around that would be, I fully hope that Logjam is operating, the amphitheater at the Kettle House for 25 or 30 years, and that we are continuing to have great events out there. I think that while there are no plans to have sewer out there in the next few years that we know, and while we've had no major issues with the chemical toilets, it's hard to know what might happen over the next decade or two. And I wonder if granting an indefinite variance now versus granting something that would be revisited on a regular basis would give us more or less ability as a health board to react if at some point there were sewer out there that we wanted permanent bathrooms connected to, or if there were some catastrophic thing that happened that we wanted to revisit the variance. So I don't know, Shannon, if you could maybe just speak to those things if you have thoughts.
Sure. The first thing I'll tell you is Big Sky Amphitheater really does rely on porta potties as well. They would have the ability to connect to public sewer. And there are just kind of some interesting things that happen that allow them to operate without a variance, and they do have some public bathrooms available. And it's something that Nick has brought up several times. So it isn't, and then of course there's a lot of event-based things that where porta potties are brought in, even in facilities like Harris Park. If you're going to have a really large event there's some permanent bathrooms there. I would say that the variance in no way prohibits Logjam Presents from looking at bathrooms or looking at some bathrooms on site, and so that would be a possibility. They wouldn't have to necessarily, with this variance, they don't have to necessarily try to accommodate 4,000 people at each event with permanent facilities. So there's still opportunity there, and honestly, the staff has been looking at, but because of COVID had to set aside the idea that there are just some places where porta potties make a lot of sense. They make a lot of sense environmentally, and the key is that they continue to be operated well. That is part of the variance. And remember that if Logjam Presents, for whatever reason, stopped providing the porta potties or stopped keeping them clean, put them in a place where they would tip over, any of those things, it would void the variance. And so they would have to come back. If we started having problems, of course, that's not the first thing that happens. You interact with the operator and the manager, but if it became a real problem, the variance could be voided just based on that. That's one of the conditions. But the other thing is that variances take a lot of staff time. They take even ones that we do over and over again take time, and so just wanting to reduce that need, I think it was our recommendation to Nick as staff that he not put an end date on it, and then let's see, there was one more, all those questions I was thinking that I can't remember now. So that's a lot. That's where our minds were. Yeah.
Thanks, Shannon.
Super helpful. I guess one last brief clarification, like in 5 years, let's say there's a sewer main that's out there that they could connect to. Would the existence of the permanent variance make it more difficult for the health department to say, okay, now we want permanent bathrooms connected to sewer? Because there's nothing in the variance about that as a condition.
That's correct. And it certainly could be added as a condition that, if sewer becomes available, you have to connect within X amount of time.
And as Logjam, if you want to put a condition like that in there, that, I mean, obviously it's not our decision, but
yeah,
we would be absolutely comfortable with that.
I guess I would ask Gina just real quick Gina, is this particular parcel? I think this parcel might not even be in the Missoula wastewater treatment plant service area.
I was just trying to bring up that most recent survey, Shannon. I think that it is.
Okay.
I'm not sure that the Bonner West subdivision, which you heard a variance on last month, is in the MWIPSA, and this is adjacent, and so I'm making an assumption. But it is typical when properties within that service area are subdivided, that language, a requirement to connect all structures that are on septic systems to a public main that is available within 180 days, and I can certainly dig up that information quickly if you guys want that.
But that would not apply to the use of porta potties. So, that would apply to whatever's being currently put on a septic system.
Correct.
Whatever's being served by a septic system.
And then anything new going forward, they wouldn't, once a main is available, the existing structures would have to connect, and then the department staff would be precluded from issuing permits for on-site systems. But it wouldn't affect the chemical toilets, as Shannon said.
Yeah.
Ellen, you had a comment?
Thank you. I think some of it was covered. It goes back to any other similar facilities, and without taking a deep dive into, what our rules did and what came on board first and so on and so forth. I just wanted to introduce I guess the notion of, even without COVID, I mean, COVID is clearly a hardship, but even before COVID, it was actually department staff that were encouraging the applicant to go for a longer duration of variance, because, speaking for myself, we know that when that's handled correctly, we just don't have an environmental problem. And that's what this is all about. We don't have an environmental problem. Also, when you think of, now that we're in, one of the things the staff and the department intended to do before COVID was to examine how we could use chemical toilets so that it better fit these types of operations. And that may have happened if we didn't have COVID, and we would be using those new regulations that you would have approved. So again, that's rhetorical because that didn't happen, but we clearly could see we needed to start moving in that direction. And it's not just for large, otherwise well-funded, not post-COVID well-funded operations. We have to think about these types of alternatives for some of the equity issues we're facing in our community, for homeless settings and things like that. So I'm speaking at more of a philosophical level. But finally, at the environmental level, if we can handle it through regulation and the applicant in this fashion, for it's not just seasonal, it's just several times in a season for that huge rush of water, wastewater, in a difficult setting. It may be doable with enough money. It may be doable. It's a setting that's still developing, so you're definitely looking at, once you put that large of a system in there, how does that impact other development? I mean, if I were another developer out there, I'd be a little bit worried about my ability to develop because of a very large drain field setting or something like that. So I think there's an advantage of not putting that in. I actually think it would be kind of an overbuilt system that is used about a dozen times a year and would still release wastewater into the soils when in fact we can capture all of it and have it transported to the municipal treatment plant and have it released that way. So that's kind of where my head's been at on this, but we didn't quite have the regulatory ability to do that. We intended to by this time. So I am very supportive of the long-term, and I think we have a very good history of good management and operation, and we've learned from it, and I think it's going to help us in other areas where we need to find environmentally sound alternatives. I just want to speak very strongly to all of those issues and the predictability that it brings to grant this on I don't think we're using the word permanent, but on an indefinite basis. And yes, I do agree that if we could figure out if it's in the wastewater treatment area or not, that the connection, as the applicant has stated, connect when the sewer's there someday. Thank you.
Thanks, Ellen. Amber, you have another comment?
Yeah, I was just gonna, so if you want me to, if we feel like the board would like an amended motion, I'm happy to do that. I'm not sure if that's kind of where we are or not, but one of my questions was about the amount of time originally, and listening to Shannon's presentation, I'm more comfortable with that because the variance is going specifically with Logjam Presents. Is that correct, Shannon? I'm watching your head. Okay. Okay, good. And the fact that, if they're not in compliance, then it can be voided, right? So those things make me more comfortable with the longevity of it, and also giving the operator some predictability every year, that we're going forward. But I mean, I would be happy to make an amended motion if that's what the board thinks that we need to do, but I guess I would suggest instead of saying that they have to connect if it's available, saying that the variance will be reviewed when that becomes available, because I do think that Ellen's, it doesn't mean that, I guess we need to review that, I think, rather than just say that that's a requirement if it becomes available. So I'd like to know what the rest of the board thinks about that.
Thanks, Amber. Pam?
I think, didn't we decide that if the sewer did become available for the Bonner project, that's the housing project that we just reviewed, that they had to hook up to the sewer? So I don't think we should be different with this than we were with that. So I would be fine with this if we had an amended motion to require their hooking up to a sewer system if it became available.
The only request I would make on that is 180 days is unrealistic for me to build that kind of facility in that time period. It's not a bathroom I'm putting in here. It's 70 toilets and quite a long run to the sewer. So it's a complicated project and would require quite a bit of engineering and construction, and not possible in that time period.
I would agree. Just from what I do in my day job, that 180 days isn't reasonable. It might be reasonable to, apply for a permit for construction or for connection to a system, but not to actually implement the construction. So there's a little bit of a trick. I think we just need to consider, what the wording is for a timeline to make application for a connection to that public facility that may become available in the future. And I don't know that it would require an amendment to the motion to add a condition to the variance.
Deb, so before we consider whether we want to do an amendment to the motion, I'm not sure I'm hearing this correctly, because I don't think that a residential facility that has regular usage, daily usage, of the system is quite the same as this concert venue. So I would like to hear what Shannon and anyone else has to say about, I guess, the differences there, whether that makes sense as an amendment or that it does really make sense to re-review it at the time that becomes available. I don't completely understand that, I guess.
Okay, Shannon, will you take that up?
Sure. Yeah, I really like doing it as a re-review because I think it's going to be a long time before it gets there, and that we'll have more information and different information at that point. And I just wanted to say that Gina did verify that it is within the Missoula wastewater treatment plant service area, which means that there will be a requirement, or there is a requirement, that Logjam Presents connects the existing facilities within 180 days, the ones that are existing on wastewater. Absolutely agree, though, that what we're talking about here is not just connecting, and I shouldn't even say not only connecting, but also building the facilities, and those processes just take more time than 6 months. And so I think staff would be comfortable either way, but if you were going to go with has to connect, it should be, it certainly should be for longer than 6 months, because it's build and then connect, build permit toilet facilities, so.
Thank you. Gina, did you have additional information as well?
Just barely. I think both Amber and Shannon just covered it, but I wanted to acknowledge Pam's comment that the previous variance that we heard last month, it was a condition that we put on that variance. It's actually just a requirement of the health code. So it was acknowledged in the variance that was just the requirement. That's true of all existing structures in the MWIPSA. So like Shannon said, this is construction of something new. And so to say, geez, 6 months is very unreasonable to connect to sewer. The the 180-day requirement in the rule, we do believe is not unreasonable because it's dealing with only those existing structures. So I just wanted to draw that distinction, but.
So Gina or Shannon, because the parcel is in the MWIPSA and it's already a requirement, does it need to be restated in here or not, that existing facilities would connect within 180 days?
I don't think that needs to be restated, but the question really is, can they continue to use porta potties? And so it's just like, you know, if the variance were indefinite, they could continue to use porta potties and still have to connect the other facilities that have, you know, plumbed water to them.
Right. So I think it's probably worth stating that the parcel is in the MWIPSA and the requirement is that existing facilities are connected within 180 days and that at that time this variance will be re-reviewed.
I like that.
And Dr. Stanger, I thought you had your hand up. Did whatever you had, did it get answered?
It did, and I love your motion. That sounds great to me.
It's just a friendly idea, friendly amendment to the motion. Josh, I see you're off mute. Did you have something, Josh?
No, I like what you said and would love to see it incorporated into the motion language, and then let's get this done.
Okay, before we can get this done, I want to take public comments on the motion on the floor, which is to approve the findings of fact, the conclusions of law, and the variance decision with respect to the use of chemical toilets at the Kettle House Amphitheater. Do we have any public that would like to comment on the motion? Okay, I think we'll note for the record that we had 5 public comments that we've discussed, both with staff and the applicant, and responded to those. And I think we have the motion on the floor. Is it understood? Are all the board members ready for a roll call vote?
Yep.
Okay, so on the motion, Amber, how do you vote?
Yay.
Pam?
Yes.
Josh?
Yes.
Dr. Stanger?
I vote yes too, although I want to clarify, we are voting on the motion with the additional condition that you just stated, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
With the
I
amendment.
think you need to accept that amendment, and I do
Just
accept.
wondering about that.
Okay, thank you, Amber, for accepting the amendment to the motion. And for the record, I also vote yes, that motion carries. Thank you to staff and the applicant for the work on this.
Thank you, everybody. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Nick. And I have to get reorganized here just a little bit. So we are now moving on to agenda item number 4, which is, again, Shannon on the hot seat for rescinding current comprehensive COVID-19 mitigation requirements and recommendations and replace with recommendations to follow CDC guidance. Shannon.
Good news is I think I've got the PowerPoint figured out. So let's see if I have. All right, so. Okay, there we go. There's a high presenter view. Oh, now I have to find you again. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, now I can't find you. Okay, hold on, everybody. So embarrassed. Okay. I thought I figured it out, but we're going to do it this way instead. I think this will help you see it a little bit better than my last one. And maybe before my next one, I'll get it all figured out. So, okay, we are going to talk about the COVID-19 mitigation requirements. And Gonna try to get it on the right slide there. There we go. So first, I just want to remind everybody what your existing recommendations are. So a couple of months ago, the board issued some new recommendations, and almost everything was a recommendation, but you kept the face covering requirement in effect until we reach certain criteria. And so those existing recommendations were to find ways to businesses, and this went out to businesses, or it was directed toward businesses and to government entities and places of worship and places of assembly, that everybody find ways to continue to enable physical distancing between non-associated customers and visitors. And that included perhaps reducing capacity or using visible cues and spacing tables and equipment 6 feet apart and limiting the number of people on a dance floor, say, well, very specifically, using plexiglass or other protection at point of sales, and then providing table service or being very particular about how bars were serving drinks so that there was not a crush at the bar. And then to the degree possible, have staff maintain 6 feet from other staff. And then the existing recommendations went on to say that they should ensure staff know the symptoms of COVID-19 and that they don't allow symptomatic individuals to work, and that staff get tested if they are symptomatic and use asymptomatic testing when available, and encourage people to get vaccinated, and then to frequently clean and sanitize commonly touched surfaces. And then along with that was a recommendation that so face coverings were continued to be required until we met certain metrics. And remember, there was a good conversation about what those metrics should be at the health board meeting. But basically what the health board ended up with is that not until May 11th, because May 11th would allow people who wanted to get vaccinated and just jumped at the chance right away to have gotten at least 2 weeks after their second vaccination. So wanted to make sure that, and more people to get at least the first and second vaccine. So May 11th was chosen as the day. And then the other metric was that at least 60% of residents aged 16 and older have received at least one dose of the vaccine. Now, since that time, we've got a larger denominator because kids 12 and older can now also get the vaccine. But we did reach that on the 11th. And so starting on the 11th, this was issued on the 10th, but starting on the 11th, the face covering rule became a recommendation. And Ellen's recommendation was specifically that among children aged 2 to 15, that they wear masks, face coverings when they're in group or settings such as daycares and day camps and classrooms and at social events. And then everyone 2 and up at events gathering in places where there's likely to be both vaccinated and unvaccinated people. And then there were some examples of that. But since this came out, CDC has some changes in their recommendations, and the CDC recommendations really focus on whether you as a person are vaccinated or whether you're not vaccinated. And so vaccinated people can, according to the CDC, can go out into groups. They don't have to physically distance. But if you're unvaccinated, that's risky. And so the recommendation is if you're unvaccinated to still wear a face covering, be cautious in large groups and try to stay 6 feet away from other people. And so in order to not have to continually chase the CDC recommendations, we are recommending that there be a new joint resolution, both from DeShane, who is the health officer as of today, official health officer as today, and the board. And you got the resolution, and there's the whereas statements that are of course important, but I'll just focus on the resolution part of it, and that it's rescinding all the previous COVID-19 mitigation recommendations from the board, and the health officer specifically rescinds the recommendations from that May 10th order, from the face covering order. and that both the Board of Health and the health officer encourage Missoula residents and visitors to follow the CDC recommendations and best practices for the spread of COVID-19. And then we have the proposed motion would be to adopt that proposed resolution updating Missoula's COVID-19 mitigation recommendations.
Thanks, Shannon. Do we have someone who wants to make that motion?
I'd make the motion that we adopt the proposed resolution updating Missoula's COVID-19 mitigation recommendations.
Thank you, Josh. Board or staff questions or comments on the proposed motion? Not seeing any hands go up. I think just I think that it's great that, you know, the place where we are and Deshane's presentation of our metrics and our update. I think Missoula County is really leading in the state in terms of vaccination and prevalence of disease and doing a great job. I just want to remind everyone that I traveled last weekend and in federal facilities, airports, airplanes, they have different rules and regulations, and just be sure that you're aware of the regulations that are in place at the places that you might venture out to, and be respectful of those rules and regulations that are in place, and that business owners also can have rules and regulations that they're putting in place. And so just be mindful of notices that might be on the doors at businesses, and be respectful of the wishes of the business owners as you're out and about. So that's my only comment to the proposed motion. Is there any other board comments on the motion? Do we have any public comments on the motion to rescind current comprehensive COVID-19 mitigation requirements? I don't see anything. So I think with that, we will take a roll call vote on the motion on the floor. Amber, how do you vote?
Yay.
Pam?
Yes.
Josh?
Yes.
Dr. Stanger?
Yes.
Debbie votes yes, that motion carries. Thank you. Next up is Deshane with possible action to approve proposed fiscal year 22 county budget for the health fund. And I think you're probably I think we have an email, but you're gonna share some information. Great, take it away.
I'm gonna pull that up right now. Okay, so on my screen, I'm hopefully, the reason it's so small is I'm trying to just show just one part at a time so we don't get too confused. So starting with the revenues. At first look, our total revenue shows a decrease of roughly 1.3 million when compared to the previous year. That is because of the COVID funding that came through. That was one-time COVID funding in fiscal year 21. We also expect to receive revenues from the federal government, including ARPA funding. We just don't know what that is yet for this year. So the revenues right now do not include or represent those very specific funds that might be coming down to the health department. We do, we're getting already some preliminary ideas, and we'll bring that to the board as soon as we have the actual numbers. But we do expect that it hopefully will be a significant amount of money. We just don't have exact dollar amounts, and we're not putting that in the budget for approval right now. We will bring that back to the board once we have more information. The cash need is showing pretty high this year. Ellen told me that in the past it's not usually been this high, but that's because it represents a 78,000 1-year loss from the travel clinic because of COVID, people were not traveling. So all the fee services that the travel clinic normally provides were not provided. We do expect that to go, it's already starting to, we're seeing folks come in for the travel clinic. We expect that to go back up. if anything, some national trends being predicted is that travel is actually going to explode this year because people are compensating for not being able to travel for the last 14 months as they wanted to. So we might actually see that our travel clinic fees go up. But right now, there is a $78,000 coverage that needs to be made out of the cash to help cover that. So when you remove the one-time COVID funding from the revenue picture, there is a slight increase between the fiscal year 20, which is the last year without that one-time COVID funding, and then fiscal year 22, where it's at right now. So the revenue in general is absolutely very steady. It's just going to be wonky last year, this year, and maybe another year or so because of COVID. Our ARPA funds, we're being told, will extend even beyond this year, so possibly into next year. So we will bring all of that information to the board as it comes available. But that's where we are at with the revenue. And then on the expenses, and I can hopefully, make that easier. Salaries right now are we have one negotiation process with one of our unions going on right now, and then another negotiation process with the union is going to come after that. So the salaries, budgeted salaries, include a 2.5% raise to be negotiated, but also a 0.5% increase in fringe, and that's calculated each year. The personnel expenses overall are budgeted to decrease by 7% from the last fiscal year's amended budget. And then operating expenses are budgeted to decrease significantly, 32%. And that is just a reflection of a lot of the COVID response work is going away. So we are in the process. We have a lot of COVID specific temporary staff, and we are in the process of right sizing that workforce. We needed a larger workforce when the pandemic was in full swing, and the response, the need of the response was greater. As that need, it becomes more focused, we need to make sure that our staffing reflects the current situation. So we are reducing the temporary work staff to reflect the actual need. And so you'll see the budget for operations has decreased by about 32%. We right now are not budgeting any capital expenses out of the health fund for fiscal year 2022. And then the ongoing cash needs, so not that one time that we're making up for the travel clinic, when you subtract that ongoing cash need is going to be submitted to the county as an out of structure budget. And we obviously work with them on planning and addressing any gaps and needs as that moves forward. So that is where we are at now. I'll just put that on the big screen so you can see everything. It was just easier to go one at a time. So that's where we're at with the health fund proposed fiscal year 2022 budget. And I'd be happy to take any questions. And honestly, Ellen's probably going to have to answer most of them. She's been doing just a great job holding me by the hand, walking me through this, my first budget process, for the health department. So I'm sure that there are some things that I still have yet to really master, and Ellen can help answer questions. And she's already got her hand up, so I'm sure she's going to clarify some stuff.
Ellen, what do you have?
Well, I don't think I describe it as holding them by the hand. I think it's much more of the turn on the fire hose approach, which DeShane has been very adept at dealing with. Within this budget, there is it's not really a new program. It is the improvement of an existing service that we've been calling Welcome Home Baby, that involves 3 of our public health nurses. And it's part of your strategic plan, which now, of course, has ended, but we were poised to upgrade that particular service to new moms, new babies, to an evidence-based approach. And Sarah Heineman was all ready to do that as part of the strategic plan, more than a year and a half ago. She's like very, very close to implementing that. So doing that, I just wanted to point out that we are going to upgrade to that with existing staff. There are, however, some one-time costs for the training. However, the nurse managers overnight wrote a grant and did receive a $20,000 grant, which is also in this budget for that initial training. And Sarah will want to come back in front of the group, and when we get back to, as we're starting to do regular agendas, and talk with you more about implementing that program. Again, it's called Family Connects. The things that are not in that budget, I've actually arranged for those to be adopted under a separate motion, simply because if you adopt this budget that DeShane's put in front of you to move forward, they are not yet in the budget, and that is customarily how it should be handled. The city and the county do not put things in the budget that are new that you're requesting. So I would suggest, unless there's other questions, that you approve this budget and recommend it to both the city and the county, and then I'll come back and cover those other two enhancements.
Thanks, Ellen. Anyone interested in a motion? And it's on the agenda. I can read it if you guys need me to.
Please do.
The motion would be to approve the proposed fiscal year 22 county budget for the health fund.
So moved.
Thank you, Josh. Any board questions on the motion on the floor? I think I have a comment, and it's for DeShane and Julie as we move forward in our future budgets, and it's that I think we need to have a standing budget item on our future agendas to review the budgets, because of a lot of the monies that are coming in and out from FEMA and ARPA funds, paying back expenditures that we had in fiscal year 21, and just tracking all of that along until we're made as whole as we're going to be made, so that we know our standing with respect to budgets as we move forward in a maybe in the old normal hopefully way. So that's my only comment on that. I don't see any other hands raised. Are there any public comments on the motion on the floor to approve the fiscal year 22 budget for the health fund? Seeing none, we will take a vote on the motion to approve the budget. Amber?
Yay.
Pam?
Yes.
Josh?
Yes.
Dr. Stanger?
Yes.
Debbie votes yes. That motion carries. Thank you. Next up on the agenda, as Ellen alluded to, which is to approve and recommend to the city and county funding of the enhancement request of a 1.0 FTE environmental health specialist land team as a first priority, and a 0.5 mid-year transition of the PIO to a regular department position in FY22 as a second priority. Ellen? Ellen, if you're talking, then you're on mute. And we're not seeing the enhancement up on the screen either. I'm not sure what happened to Ellen. I guess, Shane, would you be prepared to pinch hit and go through the enhancement request?
I know, she has been having some issues with her network dropping, and then she usually pops right back. But I will start pulling that up, because I know she emailed it to me, and probably right about the time I find it, probably just pop right back in.
So I think I'm off mute now. Is that?
Yes. We have you.
Deshane, if you
We
could
can't hear you very well, Ellen, but we can hear you.
Thank you, I'm sorry. Deshane, if you could put the document up. You think I have this totally figured out by now. Okay, so that, Debbie, you basically, you summed it up, and so I won't go through everything that's in that document. The enhancements have been discussed with the administrative teams, of course, not the decision makers or elected officials yet, just for submittal of both the city and the county. They are in order of priority. We usually don't ask for enhancements so that, the board will be less familiar with this approach. But we are in great need of an additional environmental health specialist on the land team. That's about a $66,000 cost. The good news is that the vast majority of that cost can be covered by fees. You will be asked, some of those fees are already being realized by the increased workload and of course the demand that causes us to ask for this enhancement. So most of it would be covered by those. You'll be asked in July, once those fees are, once that's all written up, to approve those fees. And then of course, because of the House Bill 121, those approvals for fees will have to go to a governing body. So that's on track. This is to cover mandated services, and we need to remain timely. We are timely, but we're having some difficulty with that. We're having keeping things prioritized. And another aspect of this position will be the following up of complaints. Complaints, of course, don't generate revenue. In fact, they generate an awful lot of cost, and often those include putting demands on the county attorney's office. But the citizenry does expect a response, and certainly the elected officials quite rightfully expect a response to some of these complaints, and some of them are gnarly. There's no decrease in some of the complaints that we receive, and post-pandemic with some of the inequity issues and people moving out or moving along, we're going to see more of some of those garbage dumping and other types of complaints. So it's a highly needed position. Your fees have not been raised for this since I think 2018. So I'm moving this request forward unless you disapprove it. The second one is a second priority, not a top priority. I think it's pretty well explained in there, but the board was abundantly clear that in their last strategic plan that we needed to do more in the line of, it's often called marketing, but it's much more than that. It's community engagement. What services do we have? So on and so forth. We're certainly on the map now because of COVID. Lots of it is positive, some of it isn't, but we need to be out there and engaging, and not on just COVID, right? When COVID goes away or tones down more and becomes endemic, we have a zillion programs and opportunities for citizens to participate and for needs. And our experience with just a staff level, not a communications director even, but a professional staff level public information officer, has just been abundantly clear that, wow, that's the way we recommend going. So this is based on some kind of rough assumptions, but if our current position of a COVID PIO were called upon significantly less by mid-year, we would want to keep that position and then transition it into serving and being integrated with the entire department and with board activities, and also joining forces with a lot of other PIOs because we have so many partners, which is what we did with COVID. And also the intent would be, if that works out, that we would be requesting that it be full-time funded in the following fiscal year. This particular activity may be fundable through ARPA, but I'm being advised that I need to submit it into both budgeting processes at this time, our regular tax-funded process and the ARPA-funded process. So at the bottom of the document, there is a proposed motion if Shane could move to that. And we don't have a current revenue for it. So the motion, which I can't begin to read, but I did write it. If someone would like to consider making that motion after board discussion, thank you.
Any discussion on the information presented? I don't hear anything and I don't see any hands up. Is anyone interested in making the motion? Dr. Stanger?
I do have one question. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'm just confused about why this isn't in the budget that we just approved. Like it's just a process question of why are we doing it this way instead of just building it into the budget and us having approved a slightly larger budget. And
Right.
maybe that's stupid, so I apologize for asking it. But
No, it's not stupid. The county gets, the county commissioners and the city council both get a lot of requests for enhancements. And it is up to the top administrators. So in the county, that is the CAO, the COO, and the CFO to recommend. And it's similar in the city, and ultimately it's the mayor who recommends to city council. And particularly in the county where we deliver the whole budget, because we're administered budgetarily wise in terms of the handling of the money and the showing of the budget publicly, et cetera, and the levying of the taxes in the county, they do not allow budgets to come forward with enhancements. We put forward what's called a sustainment budget, and they first look at what are your needs tax-wise to sustain your current level of operation. So right off the bat, when you look at a 2.5% raise, we ask the city, we don't have new revenue for that. So we ask the city and the county, when they're apportioning tax funds or levying mills, as they do in the county only, we regularly ask them for that, and they consider and have always honored that sustainment need, which is a little bigger this year. And they will first determine that they're going to, after scrutinizing it, of course, will determine that they're going to raise the taxes or not. Valuations may have gone up. And they have to do that for the entire city and the entire county and the slew of enhancement requests. So they do not allow us to put them in there. And then they take them one by one and determine how they fit into the overall county priority as well as the overall tax picture.
Thanks, Ellen, for the explanation. Any other questions? Anyone want to make the motion?
This is Pam. I move that we approve and recommend to the city and county funding the enhancement requests of a 1.0 full FTE environmental health specialist land team as a first priority, and the 0.5 mid-year transition of the public information officer to a regular department position in fiscal year 22 as a second priority.
Thank you, Pam. Any other board discussion or questions on the motion on the floor? Hearing none, we'll do a roll call vote on the motion. Amber?
Yes.
Pam?
Yes.
Josh?
Yes.
Dr. Stanger?
yes.
Debbie votes yes. Motion carries. Thank you, everyone. Next up, sticking with the budget theme, is Shannon to present possible action on approval of proposed fiscal year 22 county budget for the animal control and junk vehicle funds.
Great, thank you. I'll start with the animal control funds, and this will look familiar because it is the same format that we use for the health fund. So as for revenue, we actually did a lot of adjustments in the fee revenue categories because we didn't do that last year and kind of needed to based on historical performance and expectations, but the total revenue is unchanged. And so there wasn't really a change at all between the 2021 and 2022 fiscal years. And you can see there that most of our revenue comes from taxes in the animal control fund, and then 31% comes from fees. And then we do have a 10% cash dependence in this particular budget. And there's a good portion of that is being used for capital expenditures, but a small amount is a structural imbalance that we're going to just have to, an operating imbalance that we're going to have to resolve. So the salaries increased by 1%, but like the health fund, it included a 2.5% raise for staff. And the reason it only increased by 1% is just because of staff turnover and positions that were making more or would have been making more, are coming in on the entry level. And then like expenses, like revenue, we just adjusted several categories to reflect actual spending. And some of it really just had to do with where things were being charged by our accountant, and coming to some understanding about where that's happening. And then there really is, we go over in physician care every year the amount that we budget. But one of the things that animal control does is, if there is an animal that needs a surgery and it's something that we, taxpayers really, we can't justify taxpayers paying for it because it's pretty expensive, animal control can raise money really quick, either through Friends of the Shelter or through their Facebook page, for people who want to help pay for that physician care. And so while physician care is increased, so was that revenue line. So it kind of, balances out. And then the capital expenses that I was talking about earlier also include additional architectural services to get the shelter addition ready to bid. So we've got the initial shelter increased drawings, and I don't know if we've presented those to the health board, and so that might be something that you're interested in, and we could do that at a future meeting. But right now we just do not have enough space for staff at all. In fact, COVID made that super clear, but we knew it before, which is why we were headed down this road. And as part of the expansion, we would also increase the space that we have for animals and improve flow for the public, and have quite a few safety measures included in that. All right. So of expenses, not surprisingly, most of it is personnel. Personnel is just our most valuable resource, 72%. And then 23% is operating expenses, and 5% is that capital. So then just, you'll see in all of our small funds, the total expenses here don't match the total revenue here, which is always a good thing, but it's also because it's required that we have a 5% cash reserve. And so we do. And that is part of the cash budget, the cash need up here, up above this. So that is the animal control budget. Would you like me to go straight into junk vehicle, or do you want to do each separately?
It's taken as one on the motion, so I think let's present, well, since it's up here, let's, and they're separate files, let's ask for questions on the animal control fund before we move on and change what we're presenting. Are there questions or comments on the animal control budget? I think I have one, and I think you just explained it, but our cash requirement for 5% is about $50,000. Cash on hand up above was 100, and so 50 of that is just the reserve, but 50 of it was actually used in the structural deficiency and operations this last year.
Well, 50%, $50,000 is actually used for capital projects, and only about $2,000 is being used for the structural issue, which we may have to resolve before the county commissioners even approve it. And I mean, it is a very small amount. And I'll just tell you that this does not represent all the cash that animal control has. It represents the cash that's needed. There's not a lot more cash from last year. We don't know exactly what the cash is, so it's estimated. And then we do have some money in our building reserve fund that we were able to put in several years ago. And so we're not having to touch that with even some of well, we might have to, because I don't know if we really budgeted enough to do the architectural drawings. We might have to do a budget amendment later once we understand that more. But we have a meeting coming up with the architect about
Okay.
that.
Okay, and then I'll just say a comment that I said when in budget committee that when we were reviewing these, that I had asked to for maybe the animal control to take up a study or just research and look at best practices for increasing licensure. We remain low 30s sort of in the licensure uptake, and you know, where are communities that are doing better, and sort of what sort of ways are they able to get more compliance with the licensure requirement, which of course would take that structural deficiency issue off the table that we have. So I don't see any other hands up. Are there any other questions on the animal control budget? Seeing none, let's move on to junk vehicle funds.
All right. Okay, this is probably the best funded program that we have at the health department. But we also are limited in what we can spend the money on. So the majority of the revenue by far for the junk vehicle program comes from motor vehicle licensing fees, and it comes through as a grant from DEQ. And so we get $1.40 per light vehicle registered. So it doesn't just deal with light vehicles in the junk vehicle program, but that's how they decide how much counties get. And so for fiscal year 2022, we get up to $215,000. And then there's also, we do have money in our capital improvement fund, and that can only be used for capital projects. And we do have a capital project this year. So we are, as long as we can make it happen, we will probably need to transfer some of that capital funding over from that particular fund. And I'll just say that we're only allowed to have up to $200,000 in that fund. And then we have to return, and I'll put that in quotation marks, any unused money to DEQ at the end of the year. And the way that that happens is that they deduct our next year's grant. So if we didn't spend all of our money, our capital improvement fund was at $200,000, then that money would be deducted from the next year's grant. So we try really hard not to make that happen, but we also, of course, want to be smart stewards of the public's money. And that's one of the reasons why it really started in Missoula with Representative Curdy at the time. We can now spend up to 20% of our fund on junk vehicles, and junk mobile homes, getting rid of junk mobile homes and non-motorized vehicles. And we work really hard to spend all of that money to get that done. And we had some great projects this year. So proud of that. And so again, like the other funds, this includes a 2.5% increase that is to still be negotiated as part of the union. The other thing, though, that we did this year is because of the junk vehicle and the junk non-motorized vehicles and the junk mobile homes, we upped the FTEs in this program from 0.85 FTEs to 0.9. It's actually a full-time employee, but the other part of that is of that employee is in community decay, which is captured in the health fund. And so we get $10,000, which is in the health fund every year for community decay. The nice thing about, the the reason I did it is because really more of his time is being spent in junk vehicle. But the nice thing is that gave us a little more capital to be able to be spent on cleanup projects. And Jim Beyondich is doing a great job with that. So this is also a very small program. And so we really have one full-time FTE person who's involved in that, and then portions of administrative and management time on this. So the capital project that we are looking at is in grading and improving drainage with the junk vehicle yard. And we're working with our public works department. They've been a giant help in helping us figure out the right way to do that. And then I already talked about that state law allows us to spend up to 20% of our funds. So in this case, and it's only because we have so much in capital projects, is that's the largest amount of our expenses this year. That's not normally the case. But operations, this is one of those cases where operations is actually larger than personnel. And that's because Jim manages to get a whole lot of cleanup done out there. So overall, there's a 2% increase in expenditures, and most of that is due to the increase in both FTEs and that increase that they have, the annual increase. So, and this fund requires about $16,000 cash reserve, which we have considered in our budget. That's the junk vehicle story. Everybody knows I can talk a long time about junk vehicle for some reason, but I'll stop.
Any questions with the information presented? Not seeing anyone ready for the motion. And I can read it if anyone needs that. Amber, are you ready, or do you need me to read it?
I might need it read, but I'm happy to make the motion.
Okay. The motion is to approve proposed fiscal year 22 county budgets for the animal control and junk vehicle funds. So Amber's making that motion. Any other board questions on the motion? Not seeing any. Do we have any public comments on the motion on the floor? All quiet there as well. So roll call vote. Amber, how do you vote?
Yes.
Pam?
Yes.
Josh?
Yes.
Dr. Stanger?
Yes.
Debbie votes yes. Motion carries. Thank you. Next up is for Ellen. This is not for action, but just an update on the proposed fiscal year 22 county budget for the Substance Abuse Prevention Fund. Oh, there's a question.
Yeah. So my apologies. I did not have the Substance Abuse Prevention Fund summarized and ready in time to get it to you. And so it will have to come to you in July. There's generally no board decisions to make about that fund. Not to deny you the opportunity to do that, but it's a very complex but small and tight fund. It comes from a levy that is earmarked for substance abuse prevention. We don't actually operate the entire program. So the levy, the money does not come to us directly. It comes through the grants department of the county. Staff, Cindy Farr, actually, who's still functioning as incident commander, did have it ready. And I forgot to put it in front of Debbie. So it's not in your packet. Since that time, though, we have discovered that as we get closer to the end of the fiscal year, our projections for the cash balance, as they get more realistic, do show a small deficit or structural imbalance in that fund. So I've asked Cindy, and she'll work with Lisa Bishevich, who actually manages that part of the program, to see if they can rectify that structural imbalance before they bring it to you. Otherwise, we will have to work with a number of county parties in order to do so. So my apologies there. On the same breath, I want to thank Shannon, for she always does her own budgets for these separate funds, but I'm usually the one to summarize them, and she took that upon herself so that Deshane and I could focus on other things, including the health fund. And in so doing, I think she came up with a new way to summarize these smaller funds. It, at least to me, looks nicer, makes more sense. So thank you for that. My third comment, and this is the really important one, it's at this meeting, which is usually in May, sometimes in April, but in a legislative year, it's almost always in May. So we're a month to two delay, as is the city and the county. They're not a month to two, there may be a month delay, but I always bring the board a cash budget. A cash budget is not required in any of our budgeting processes by the city or the county, but we have historically used it with the health board. Because we are a special fund, and much of our fund is not tax funded, and therefore not always under local control, the cash budget shows 3 buckets of funds. It shows, number one, what do we need for one time only? So if we are going to buy, I don't know, a car or a truck, or, you know, or when we did 4 or 5 years ago, a huge remodel that we saved for, it shows that one-time cash expenditure for your approval. The second budget is how much cash do you need on a continuing basis to operate the program? And as usually that's very small. As Shane said, this year it's a little bigger than usual. So that's just to get through the next fiscal year. Take out travel clinic, we need over 100,000, and we usually are just below 100,000. The third and very important piece when we talk about restoration is most of the money in that cash budget is in a reserve. That is the biggest bucket of the 3. And so you have the 5% reserve that the commissioners require of all funds, the 3% additional reserve that because of our softer funding, the board enacted a requirement for that. We then have a couple of sinking funds, putting aside for different things that will happen with as pay dates come up irregularly throughout the months and fiscal years. And then we also have earmarked funds for probably a third of our 36 different contract funded programs, such as suicide prevention, DUI, all of those different types of programs. If they had funds left over, those are earmarked and can be used in a one-time fashion to feed back in. So that's a very important document, and it's bothered me so much that because of COVID and that it's just not possible to bring that to you. There are folks in the county, from the CFO down through emergency operations. There are a number of folks in the county and our own accountants that are continually working on the different types of funding for COVID. Some of those, we don't know what they're going to be. Some of them turned out to be look-backs. And so they're still going through the records to do a look back. So for example, FEMA did not determine that they should provide reimbursement for testing for COVID until January. So we had been testing for 10 months without a FEMA reimbursement. So we have to go back, and we do have the records, but it's not totally in the control of the health department or their accounting staff. There's several layers. So Deshane will be putting meetings together with different parties to continue to try to rebuild that picture. I would refer you for, if there's a benchmark, and there's a lot of caveats to this particular benchmark, but for purposes of what restoration should look like, I would refer you to your last adopted cash budget, which was FY20. Now, we still have a big hole there, and as of this morning, I can't even tell you what the hole is, but I will tell you that we did receive our first infusion of CARES funding. The county got it, but the county has to rectify it and reconcile it with everything else they did. So we did get put into our fund, the health fund specifically, last week, $5.3 million of CARES funds. And the county is reserving up to not guareeing, but reserving up to 25% of ARPA funds for eventual reimbursement. But some of that reimbursement will have to look at our reserve requirements. So restoration is, needs to be determined on how is restoration really defined? You've heard me say a zillion times that cash funds that were not otherwise earmarked by this board were there for when we had outbreaks. And we had one. So we spent a lot more, but we do need restoration of some of those other buckets of cash. So that's a big chore. It makes me nervous not to have that for you, but everybody's up to speed as far as they can be, and I appreciate Debbie's decision to put budget on the agenda for several months until you fully understand that picture. Thank you.
Thanks, Ellen. I think we're on to agenda item number 9, which is another action, potential action on a letter of support for the Health Department's groundwater investigation program application for the Seeley Lake nitrates and authorization for the vice chair to sign. So Shannon, you're back up.
I am. You can tell that there's people on vacation. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't be doing this. I think I finally figured it out. To do the PowerPoint. So happy. Okay, there we go. All right, so we're talking about Seeley Lake nitrates. So every year, the Bureau of Mines and Geology invites organizations and individuals to nominate projects for a groundwater investigation program. And this year, the Health Department did that for the Seeley Lake area. And we did that because, well, first I'll just remind board members that Seeley Lake had been pursuing a sewer project. And so the I don't know, what is that, mustard yellow area highlighted on the map is their sewer district. And so they were looking at providing sewer in several phases to this area, and which was good because after they were already figuring out sewer, already had a plan for bringing sewer to the community. The health department learned that there was a nitrate problem in Seeley Lake, and a nitrate problem in the groundwater, specifically in Seeley Lake, and in some instances even exceeding the standard. And so the health board we created a policy, and then we put it in the regulations, a special management area, and it's this area in purple. And the special management area currently has some regulations in place that make sure that we're not making the problem any worse. And so the places, if somebody wants to develop kind of up groundwater stream of a area that's either at or near the standard, they have to do some additional investigation and show that they won't cause or contribute to a violation of the standard, or they won't be able to develop it. And that really has stopped some people from being able to develop, especially in this area in Seeley Lake. And just, I'm going to show you some of where the samples, I'll show you the nitrate results that we have just in a very kind of superficial way, but we have, it was actually the district that has a monitoring site here, a monitoring site down here, and then a monitoring site up here. The one down here has since collapsed, and so needs to be replaced. This is the one that's been over 10. This one was close to 7.5. This one was close to 5. The standard, the groundwater standard is 10. But since then, as I told you in my memo, the community unfortunately kind of voted. Well, I should say first, here's the nitrates for the different wells, and there is a line here. It's hard to kind of see a trend line, but this is the one, and they're not all on the same standard. I mean, none of them are on the same scale. That just makes it hard. No, these two are. But this is that well one that has been over the standard and kind of continues to spike over the standard. And these are tested quarterly. This is well number 2 that is now offline, but you could see that it was getting to 3/4 of the standard. There's this spike here that brought it over 10, and we sort of wonder if there was a confusion between these two and that particular sampling just because of what this one was doing, but I don't know. Maybe there was something that caused it to go almost to 10. And then this is the other well that's more downtown, I guess, of Sealy, and it's a slight increase, but this is half of the standard, and this is 3/4 of the standard, so it's not reaching 10. But the community was pursuing sewer, as I said, and we were very happy about that. But unfortunately, early this year, there was a vote, and that vote was to kind of reorganize the bonds in a way that felt more fair to people. But what happened is that bond vote didn't pass, and as a result, they lost all of their funding, over $10 million in funding for the project. That is particularly sad because this was before ARPA and with the wastewater projects became available. And I think Sealy, a lot of people were trying to get Sealy built. And so a lot of different agencies had interest in this. And so they might have been able to get more of that funding. But for right now, it's looking kind of dire for sewer and Sealy. And so what we've been telling the community all along is that we have enough information right now to know that you have a groundwater problem, and which is why the board has created a special management area. And the board and the health department have an obligation to do something to correct that problem. But as long as you're working towards sewer, we're not gonna like have a lot of new regulations about replacement systems, or except for the new systems not wanting to make a problem worse. And if sewer were the answer, there really would not be a need to do further investigation. With sewer, at least not on the table, maybe near the table, I don't know, but not on the table. What we need is more information for the health board and the health department to find the right solution, the right regulatory solution for Sealy Lake. And so what I'm really excited about for this particular study that we have asked for is, first of all, this is the approximate study area. It's much bigger than than either the special management area or the Sealy Sewer District. And that's because we are interested and see potential effects of sewer systems that are having on this the river, the outlet, as well as Sealy Lake. And so this particular study, this is an approximate study area, because really what we would do is we would work with the Bureau of Mines if it's selected, and with stakeholders to really refine what makes sense. You could see these are blocks. That's not like hydrogeologically correct, but this is to give them an idea of what we're looking for. And we specifically asked for to be able to help identify the extent of the problem, the how bad the problem is, where what sources may be contributing to the nitrate problem, but also that groundwater surface water interaction, which during some of the sewer district conversations, there was a lot of conversation in the community about what that really was and which way the groundwater was going. And so just to remind the board, we have an older study by the Bureau of Mines that really shows the groundwater going this way. And if groundwater is going this way, it's totally affecting the lake and not going straight down. So that it really would, and there's effect, we can see effects in the lake of nutrients. So we worked with the sewer district, who is in support and wrote a letter of support. We talked with the Clearwater Resource Council, and originally they were looking at wanting to do something bigger. And we said, you know what, we just really need something that concentrates on this area and gives us enough information. So I understand why, and we are supportive of a broader watershed investigation, but we really needed something more pointed so that we would have a finer level of detail to be able to make good regulatory decisions here. And they completely supported that and also wrote us a letter. of recommendation, as did the DNRC, which is great. And the commissioners have indicated their support as well. And Josh, I still owe you guys a draft letter of support. But I think that we've had some initial conversations with people, and they really like projects which will be used, which are helping to answer a question and will give both the community and the regulators the ability to use science to make smart decisions. And so that's what we have. If we won't know until the fall if it's chosen, but we know that the health board has supported Sealy Sewer, has been concerned about nitrates, and so we're hopeful that you will also sign this letter of support.
Shannon, can I ask you a quick question? Right.
Yes.
So you said on those wells, 10 is the standard?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Oh, okay. So 10 milligrams per liter is the nitrate standard in groundwater. And so there's a different surface water standard that's much lower. And so some of those wells, which are not drinking water wells, those are monitoring wells, have gone over that standard, meaning they have more nitrate in the groundwater than is allowed by state law.
So it's not really a problem until it's over 10?
No, well, that's not true. And so, I mean, it's a violation once it's over 10, and we really have to do something about that. But even when you're at half the standard, you've got an area of elevated nitrates. You are putting nitrates in the system in a way that it is not able to, dilute, frankly, right? And so
we're on that 1 to 10 scale that gives you concern.
I think that anytime you're over 5, we start being concerned, but we have an obligation once it gets over 10. And so you don't want it to reach 10. And so there are other regulations that look at 3/4 of the standard. And so when we're looking at septic permitting, we can't permit a system that will cause the nitrates to go over 3/4 of the standard, or 7.5 at the end of the mixing zone. This is something. It's not just the end of the mixing zone, but we're using a lot of that same thinking in when we're evaluating new projects. So you're really concerned once you have an area over 7.5. Once you have an area that's really starting to go over 5 and trending upwards, you're looking, more development is probably going to cause more of a problem. And it also really depends on the geology. So we have some areas where you get nitrates in, in one place and next door it's fine. And that might be because they're pulling from a rock aquifer, and they might really be pulling from their neighbor's septic system, or a septic system, kind of down the lane. And those are harder to figure out. But this is not a rock aquifer, but it's definitely a complicated aquifer.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments on the letter or proposed action?
Hi, it's Amber. So first of all, I find that kind of brutal that funding was lost. That's a big disappointment. So maybe I missed this but what is the timeline of the study?
They want to do the study, I think within 1 to 3 years, and then you get the results after that.
Okay, thanks. I'd be happy to make the recommended motion if we're ready for that.
I think we are. That sounds good. I can read it. The proposed motion is to, I guess, authorize the vice chair to sign a letter of support for the health department's groundwater investigation program application for Sealy Lake nitrates. So members made that motion. Any other board questions or comments on the motion? Don't see any public comments on the motion to authorize me to sign the letter. Don't see any there as well. So we'll take a roll call vote. Amber, how do you vote?
Yes.
Pam?
Yes.
Josh?
Yes.
Dr. Stinger?
Yes, sorry.
That's okay. And Debbie votes yes. Motion carries. Thank you. And I have the letter so I can attach a signature and get it back to the department. Thank you. So next up on the agenda is to approve minutes, but I don't think we have the minutes to approve. Julie, can you just confirm that? Does any other board have the minutes? I don't think we have them. So
No, I don't have them.
okay, so we're not going to take action on that. So next up is director's report with Deshane and Ellen.
I'll just start, and there aren't the words to say thank you, except the word thank you. So thank you for the privilege of working with you, all of you. Thank you for what I think is that this board offers, what's so important with the board in terms of relationship with the director. Of course, the board has policy, leadership, advocacy, and you, of course, are well known for all of that. But in terms of our relationship, I have appreciated this, what I think is a perfect balance of support and scrutiny. Both need to be present and balanced, and you have done that. And it's been a privilege. I have really enjoyed my really almost NASCAR velocity orientation with Deshane. He seems to be fine moving at that speed and taking bits and pieces. I just find him to be authentically, as a person, a professional, and someone who's into public health in this community at all levels. I also immediately have seen the managers come together with Deshane. Everybody wants success. They want each other to succeed. They want the department to succeed. I mean, that is absolutely what they are most earnest about, and they are a team. I'm officially, as of today, Deshane is the health officer and the director. I'm on the payroll doing some things I just didn't manage to get done until the 30th, and certainly available at any time that I might be able to be helpful. Aside from that, I think putting distance between me and the department is one of the best ways for that new dynamic to actually shape up. I do hope, and I will talk with Deshane next fall, I do hope to be involved in some capacity only with the academic health department. And that is really starting, has the opportunity to take off. So with that, what we say in our COVID report is end of report.
Okay, well I just watching the admiration that the staff have for Ellen has just been amazing. I think that Ellen has built a really great team here. The management team, like Ellen said, is really invested in the success of the department and the success of this entity as a group, and lifting everybody up. And so it's been a really great first month. I've really enjoyed it. That being said, it's also been a very busy first month, and I thought I would just update the board a little bit. So I have begun meeting, as Ellen did in the past. Now I am meeting weekly with the division directors, Shannon, Cindy, and Sarah. We're also going to begin our monthly managers meetings. So that's an opportunity for bilateral communication back and forth between the managers who are actually working with frontline staff getting the work done, and then the division leaders and myself. So that communication, getting that up and going. I've had introductory meetings for most of the programs and services here. Not everything, because there's a lot going on in this health department. There's a lot of work happening, and so I've had the opportunity to learn about most of it, but not all of it yet. But it's been great meeting with staff and getting to learn about all the really amazing work that staff are doing. They're just doing some great stuff. I have had the chance to visit both of staff office locations as well as the mall site vaccine clinic, and I've made it out to 2 of the mobile vaccine clinics, and also got to see staff just doing some great work out there, answering concerns and questions and even conspiracy theories about vaccines, about COVID, about the county, and just watching them do it with real professionalism. And I've been really impressed with all the work that they're doing. So it's been great. I've begun attending the regular meetings with city and county leadership. I've participated in my first joint partnership health center Missoula City County Health Department caucus for the union negotiations with our nursing union that are. I will actually be attending my first negotiation session later this month. I think in about a week and a half. And then, so that's with one of the unions, and then we'll enter that negotiation period with another union a little bit later, is my understanding. And I've had the opportunity to get trained and begin using the public health accreditation board's web-based reporting system. So looking at all of those requirements that are placed on us to maintain and keep our accreditation. And so that's been a learning experience, getting used to their web-based system and how they track all that. There's a lot to it. But again, all the staff here are amazing and have just a really great grasp of what's going on. And it's really nice because anytime I have a question, somebody here knows the answer, which is just, it's been a really great first month. And I've really thoroughly enjoyed having Ellen right here and getting to pick her brain. And I don't know that I'm willing yet to just let that go for a couple months, but we'll see. I think we're gonna have a hard time letting go of Ellen. So yeah, just it's been a really great first month and catching up, getting up to speed, and I will look forward to seeing this board next month and being even more up to speed by then. So end of report.
Awesome. Thank you both. Last up on this agenda before we change to our other meeting is any board or staff comments on items not on the agenda related to Board of Health. Amber.
Yeah, thanks. I just first wanted to thank Ellen for her many, many years of service and appreciate the comment of a combination of support and scrutiny. I think that's always kind of finding that balance is always really important. But I have not been on the board for that long in comparison to her tenure for sure, but just really appreciated having her and her experience at the helm as we navigated these times that hopefully none of us will have to navigate in our lifetime again. And also just wanted to again welcome to Shane and say that we're really happy to have you here, and I think that I can comfortably speak for the board saying that we will support you and help and just know we're here for that as you go through the transition.
Thanks, Amber. Anyone else before we move on to Water Quality District Board? Okay, we'll adjourn as a Board of Health and move on to the Water Quality District Board and taking public comments on items not on the agenda right now. I don't see any. So what we need to do here as action is item number 2, which is approve the preliminary fiscal year 22 county budget for the Water Quality District Fund. And Shannon, you're back up for that.
Okay, thank you. All right. Here we go. So the Water Quality District Fund. Most of our revenue from for water quality comes from a special assessment that's collected with property taxes. And really without, if we weren't using any cash, and the reason cash is high, we'll talk about in expenses. The special assessment revenue is about 83%, of the water quality district funding. So you can see that with this year's cash, we have about 63% coming from the assessments. We have 6% from fees and 7% from grants, and then 24% in cash. But overall, there's a 2% decrease in revenue between 2021 and 2022, but really it's entirely due to grant funding and different expectations in grant funding. And a lot of this grant funding is money in, money out that is supporting watershed groups. And so that is not, even though there's a decrease, that's not there. It's not affecting our ability to do our job in the water quality district. So like the other ones, this is based on a 2.5 salary increase to be negotiated by the unions. With that, salaries increased by 3%, and some of that has to do with the fact that there are some opportunities for increased pay based on education that were negotiated previously in the with the union. So the kind of the big news here is that we moved some expenses from the I think something happened. I think Travis tried to take me out, so I'm gonna start sharing again. Travis Ross. Okay, here we go. Okay. Have a battle with Travis. And so we moved the expenses from household hazardous waste days to the year-round facility, and that is why the cash is higher. It's because of the capital projects. The capital projects, actually, the amount of money actually went down because it will be cheaper for us to build a modular household hazardous waste facility than the permanent building that we were initially looking at. But we are, though, also expecting higher waste disposal costs because we do believe that a year-round facility, even operating a couple days of the week, will bring in more waste. And then it's just an unfortunate fact of life that they're increasing prices for this sort of waste disposal. But the particular modular pilot facility will also give us a chance to partner in a way that will help us reduce our waste and get more of it kind of back into the stream in order to have people use what they're trying to buy it for. So a lot of times these are good products that some people might be getting rid of at the same time other people are buying off the shelf. There's also an increase in our contracted services line item, and that's both to support a Big Sky Watershed Corps or AmeriCorps member. We've just had wonderful luck with our AmeriCorps members. They've done great work for us and have really helped us work on some projects that we'll be excited to share with you in the coming months. And then also for a consulting project for the Smurfit Stone site, trying to find a good resolution for the community and, of course, the environment. So overall, personnel, again, is our highest cost at about 72%. Whoops, I got some weird stuff going on here. Operating is 23%, and then the capital projects are about 5% of our budget. So, and like there was a decrease in the revenue, there's also a decrease in expenses, and most of that has to do with changes in grant spending, but also in the budget amount, the cash budgeted amount to build a household hazardous waste facility. And then this fund also has a 5% cash reserve, which is about $42,000. So let's see. I think that's the end of that presentation.
Any questions on the Water Quality District Fund? I don't see any. So the motion here, I'll just read it and someone can say if they're willing to move it, is to approve the preliminary fiscal year 22 county budget for the Water Quality District Fund.
So moved.
Thank you. Any additional board or staff questions or comments on the motion? Any public comments on the motion? Don't see any, so we will ready for a roll call vote. Amber?
Yes.
Pam?
Yes.
Josh?
Yes.
Dr. Sanger?
Yes.
Debbie votes yes. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, Travis was all ready for update on the Clark Fork River Channel Migration Zone report.
Yeah, sorry about the immature sharing. Always have trouble with it, so I was making sure I knew how to do it. So here we go. Okay, are you seeing the right thing? Sweet. Okay, so I'll try to make this quick, though it is it's quite a lengthy thing to thoroughly discuss. And so I did put a link here. So the Channel Migration Zone study was presented a number of times. I think it's 3 now. And a link to one of those presentations is just on our website. It's about an hour long, but it really goes in detail, reach by reach, how that channel, what those channel migration zones look like. So I think it is worthwhile to check that out. There's also a link to the complete study there. So what channel migration zones are and how they're different from floodplain mapping is basically with the FEMA floodplain mapping, that's projected areas that are going to experience flooding at different intervals, as opposed to channel migration zones, which are actually where the river may at some point occupy, like physically just move locations and take the house out. So flooded out versus wiped out is plain and simple. Often those CMZs, we'll call them, are similar in size to the floodplain, but not always. The concept of channel migration zones thus far in Montana have not been regulatory. In a couple of other states in the Northwest, those are regulatory in instances. I will say that with the caveat that our county floodplain regulations do take channel migration zones into account as one of the factors that are evaluated when issuing a floodplain permit. It's a really cost-effective method of assessing channel migrations, this type of methodology that was used in this report, in that it looks at reach scale analysis rather than doing geotechnical work on the ground. So it's a kind of a broader approach. So you can do quite a bit of channel for a reasonable amount of money. It can be used to help make management decisions such as floodplain, maybe eventually in on-site wastewater and well locations. And what channel migration zones do, there are 2 processes that it takes into account, both the lateral marching of the river across the floodplain over time, and then avulsion, where due to elevation differences and during a case of prolonged flooding, the channel may just change locations, cut a new channel. And that rate of migration is affected by the geology. So we do have geologic layers that you can use to kind of cut out. So we know that, a river is not going to migrate into a bedrock wall, but it's certainly material like this alluvium, loose alluvium is very, very erodible. So those rates are affected by geology and also flood history. So this just is a depiction of floods of record and an annual discharge on the Clark Fork below Missoula. So 2018 was below Missoula less than a 25-year event. If you looked on the Blackfoot or the Bitterroot, it's different, but just below Missoula, that's our history on that level. So those are the two main components that affect migration rates. So this effort, we've done a pilot project in 2009, I believe it was, and oh yeah, it's on here on the slide, and then did a historic migration look at some other sections of the river. That pilot project only included the Clark Fork below where the Bitterroot comes in, and that went to Houston. So this effort really takes all of that historic migration mapping, the pilot study, changes in methodology, and puts it all together in a comprehensive product. One of the goals was to look at pre and post Milltown Dam removal to see if those migrations rates had changed because of that. The study in summary found that those migration rates were the same upstream basically and downstream, looking at different years, so that it's really not thought to have been a factor in those changes in migration, that particularly in the target range area. And yeah, so we wanted a consistent approach to all Missoula CMZ mapping. This is just a breakdown of the reaches. So 68 miles on the Clark Fork, 23 miles on the Bitterroot. And you can see the reach titles. And if you go to the report, and the presentation really does a great job, because they do go reach by reach and look at the different migration rates and problem areas and anticipated future problem areas in all of those reaches. Okay, now it's good. Oh, here we go. The process, you look at where the river has been, you calculate a migration rate, which produces an erosion hazard area, so that's projected out 100 years, and then looking at avulsion hazard zones, and that's looking at LiDAR imagery or elevation models to determine where a gradient is in place, and then a geologic setting has been established that will make an avulsion more likely to occur. So they take aerial photography. The earliest we could get a hold of a complete data set was 1955, and then mapped the bankful channels, and where those envelop islands, those are absorbed into a singular polygon that is called the historic migration zone. The next step is to calculate those migration rates in terms of feet, and you get feet per year that is added on to the current extent of the channel and projected out. Sometimes that's going to be captured in a historic migration zone already, because the river's coming back and forth, but often it's bigger than that. And so this is a box and whisker plot showing those migration rates. That's that 75th percentile. It's kind of a busy slide, but you can see where outliers are as well. And so in Smurfit, if you look at like around Smurfit and Frenchtown, there's a lot of outliers there. So things are changing. But if you look at it over time, over 50 years of history, photographic history or more, you know, the mean migration rate is in here. Obviously in Missoula, where the river's pinned in by levees, it's not moving around much, and there's not a lot of outliers. There are no outliers. The erosion hazard area, here's what it looks like when you add that buffer onto the extent of the channel. And then looking at avulsions, this is how those are maps. You can often see them in flood photos, a little head cut going, and I wish we had time to go into this because we've already seen one of these projected avulsions happen this year around Schmidt Lane. So that validated the model right away. And then they do add restricted migration areas. So those are things that are bolstered with levee or just rock material. So it's kind of got a qualifier there. So the erosion hazard area is still there, but it's just crosshatched to indicate that there is some riprap or structural material in place to slow migration. So then, as I mentioned earlier, there are in the report, there's sections that discuss the different migration rates in various sections of the river. Here's one example of them. Like this is at Tura, where we've got a dog leg. Often these railroad crossings are what causes that energy to be displaced in more erosive manners. So some of the problem areas, honestly, this report is going to be really helpful for parks planning, we think, and with public works. It's already been presented to both of those groups. Here's another, that same section, but showing the erosion hazard areas, and the avulsion hazard zones are in red. Aerial photo as well. So I know we're at the end of the meeting, but I just wanted to, this is the gravel pit at just upstream of Reserve Street. That's anticipated to be a big problem here too. So you can find more on the website. I don't want to take any more of the time here, but it is, I think it's a worthwhile presentation, and it will have some, certainly have some applicability and various departments through the city and county. So let's see, do I have anything else in here? This is just more of Reserve Street. Okay. All right, any questions? I was given a 15-minute limit, so I don't want to keep going, but I'm happy to answer any questions. Okay. Well, thanks, everybody. I can't hear anyone if they're talking.
This is Anna, Travis. It sounded like Debbie needed to jump off and that she was designating Pam to finish chairing. Pam, are you out there?
I am out here. I didn't hear her leave. So, if there are no further questions from the board, are there any public comments from the public? Are there any public comments or comments from the board on items not on the agenda? I don't see any hands, so I will thank you, Travis, for your presentation. It sounds like that's quite a project and would be actually interesting to have a little bit more of that than just a 15-minute slam through. So maybe we can get you back on to talk about that. If there is nothing else and there are no other further comments or questions about things, we will call a conclusion to the Water Quality District Board meeting. And that will be the end for today. Our Air Pollution Control Board meeting is canceled for today. So that is it. So thank you, Deshane, welcome on board officially. And Ellen, hopefully we will get to talk on the 23rd when you have a little bit more formal leaving. But thank you very much, everybody, for attending today. So with that, I will say goodbye.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.